Good evening, I'm Leland Vittert. History shows we can look to Europe for the social programs and government intervention coming to America in a few years. Think Social Security, Medicare, massive closed-circuit TV surveillance, and the list goes on. So it is not unthinkable to look at this video of police in Paris, armed with guns, checking the vaccine passports of those who dare to dine outside and think this too is coming to America. Take a minute as you look at the people in the City of Lights as they dutifully offer up their phones. This could be a Baskin-Robbins in St. Louis, an Applebee's in Omaha, a Chipotle in Charlotte. Not surprisingly, some in London and Paris aren't too happy with the vaccine police and took to the streets. Massive protests overtook Paris and London, in addition to other European capitals, with thousands angry at the new government regulations. And we know cities across America are considering or already have instituted similar policies. How to enforce them might be slightly trickier. Mike Allen reports on this and just about everything else around the world. He co-founded Axios and writes the must-read newsletter of American Politics. Mike, good evening to you. Are these protests in Europe something American politicians are worried about?
They for sure should pay attention to them, Leland. And earlier today, you sent me some video from France where they were doing a health card check, and somebody very cheerfully said, voila. But I can tell you that across France, across Europe, that's not the universal reaction. So over the past 4 weekends in France, there have been protests about various mask, vaccine, health check requirements. Swelled to 250,000 across France this weekend. Also protests in Poland, protests in Italy, protests in Australia, Israel, across the world. And something fascinating about him, and that I think is very relevant to American politicians, is these protests do the rarest thing. They unite the right and the left. And especially in Italy, where they have a green pass that you're going to have to show, similar to that health pass, and other places in Europe showing either that you're vaccinated or that you have had a negative test or that you've recently had COVID. That's another place that these protests are flaring up.
Interestingly enough, you talk about uniting the left and the right. Sometimes the hatred of the media unites the left and the right. The BBC was the center of one of these protests. We have video from London when a huge group tried to attack the headquarters of the BBC, who were quite upset. Remember, during the BLM riots, CNN was attacked. But it does sort of bring up how politicians are going to try and either feed in or play off of this anger. You have to imagine that Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott are watching this video in Europe and thinking there's got to be a lot of anger here in America to tap into.
No, very fascinating, and taking both of those politicians. And Leland, hasn't it been fascinating to see the Biden-DeSantis interaction, which could be well be a preview of 2024. We saw that clip over the weekend of the Florida governor saying he's not going to mask his kids. He says, I'd like to see their smiling faces. And then just today, Leland, in Dallas, in my newsletter, Axios PM, you saw the news that the Dallas School District is going to try to impose a mask mandate in defiance of the governor. But here's a twist, Leland, and you mentioned at the beginning whether or not whether enforcement was possible. Here's another problem: deployment. Axios has reporting that shows that vaccine passports, which would be much like those green cards or the health check in Europe, would be technologically very difficult. You've seen all the problems that they've had in New York with the effort to use one there. And the United States just did not build our system for this. Everybody complains about the Twitter loves to snark about the vaccine cards, which are exactly the wrong size to fit in your wallet. There's no centralized database. People are rarely checked when they get the vaccine. All of that would make a legit vaccine passport very difficult to deploy in the U.S. and certainly far off.
You bring up a very good point, because you can buy stacks of those little CDC cards on the internet, and it's not that hard to then fill them out as you would see fit and then submit them along the way. Is there any talk in the Biden administration of actually coming up with some reliable national vaccine passport, or have they given up because of the reporting that you just talked about?
So I know that at the moment they're concerned about much more immediate problems. And I had a map this morning in Axios AM. I thought it was a mistake. I had one of my colleagues check it because the entire U.S. is red. It was the CDC's map of community spread, which has to do with both the number of cases and the number of positive tests. And basically the whole country was on fire. And that's a worry on every level, including economic, for this administration. So anything else would be further away. And Leland, you've said that they have said definitively they do not plan a national vaccine mandate, although, of course, today, everyone in the military being told they're going to get their shots. And Leland, I talked to some people who've been in the military. They said they get all kinds of shots for all kinds of things. It's just part of the job.
Well, and mandate and passports are different things because you can essentially make somebody want to get it by limiting what they can do without it. Mike Allen, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's getting much harder to resist. And we saw the NFL quarterback Kirk Cousins, who said he's not getting vaccinated for personal reasons. He's talking about whether he's going to set up a plexiglass shield around himself in the quarterback room. It's just going to get tougher to resist.
Yeah, for sure. And for NFL players, exactly. Mike, appreciate it as always. Thank you.
Thank you, Leland.
All right. So as Mike talked about, the concept of vaccine passports is both a political one and a medical one. Do they really work? And of all things, should you need a vaccine passport outside? Remember that video from Paris that we showed you? Well, remember all those diners with their vaccine passports getting checked? They were all outside. Here to help us understand that, Dr. Joseph Ladapo, professor of medicine and public health at UCLA. Doctor, is there any reason to check the vaccine status of people who are all hanging out outside?
I think that if your objective is to, have a system where there is a lot of enforcement and a lot of focus on COVID, then sure. If your objective is to, reduce the risk of transmission or of people not becoming ill, then absolutely not. We've known for over a year, almost a year and a half now, that outdoor transmission is probably not even 1% of the cases of COVID.
You're an expert not only in infectious disease, but in public health as well, where really the coronavirus and the issues of policy that we've talked about intersect here. African Americans have undisputedly the lowest percentage of vaccination rate among any group. Do you worry that the healthcare of African Americans, sort of their general health, is going to decline as they are marginalized farther and farther without getting the vaccine?
I don't worry about it. I mean, I think that it really speaks to what's happening right now in terms of how we're approaching the vaccines. Different communities have different rates of uptake. There are things that you can do in terms of education about risks and benefits so that people can make informed decisions. But I've looked at this issue of vaccine uptake as really being one that is a personal decision. And I personally feel that people should be allowed to make decisions about what they put in their bodies, particularly if they're adults. There's a more debate in children and schools. Schools, of course, have had mandates for different vaccines for decades. But adults really should have autonomy over what they do with their bodies.
Senator Rand Paul said that we are at a crossroads in America in terms of what we are telling people to do and what we are informing them they can do, and then in some way or another what we are arm twisting them to do by saying, if you don't do it, if you don't get the vaccine, we're going to take all of these privileges away. Does that seem like a fair assessment to you?
Yeah, no, I really enjoy watching his video that he put on Twitter about this. And I personally, and I know that people have different feelings about this, I personally am really very grateful that he has been outspoken about this, this balance between personal rights and civil liberties, and on the other side of that, how people's fears about COVID, because that's really kind of what's happening. And actually, I would add one other thing to the other side, which is not only people's fears about COVID, but their ambitions about power and control. And these are the political issues. And again, they're cast against these personal liberty individual decision-making, individual rights issues. So I personally have been really grateful that he's been outspoken about the need to be explicit regarding this tension.
I'm just wondering, Doctor, your views on this are quite nuanced. We've had you on the show a number of times. We're privileged to do it. Has you being so outspoken about this and perhaps taking a slightly different line than the typical medical group would or has and the medical community has on these issues, has that caused you any problems inside the medical community?
Oh, sure. Well, it has, but it's really, I mean, it's
Tell me
minor.
about that.
You really have to. No, thank you, Leland. Well, I think I don't want to talk too much about them because I don't think that they're what's important. I think what's really important when you step back and look at the big picture are these, really critical issues that we're facing right now, again, between people's right to work and go to school and, decide whether their children get to wear a mask or not and, walk around freely outside. So sort of the tension between these issues and this myopic focus on just COVID. And, and I think another thing to consider in terms of this tension is to realize, looking at the big picture, vaccines are available for almost everyone who wants them. There's already a lot of community immunity out there from natural infection. And we know that among the vaccinated, when they are infected with COVID, their likelihood of becoming seriously ill is very low. Same thing for people who have recovered from COVID. Yeah. So this is, things are really out of proportion right now. And it's important, I think, to be a voice that talks about kind of puts these issues into context, because it's very easy for people to get caught up in all of the, really panic and hysteria and myopic focus on COVID. And it's not a winning strategy.
Physician, professor, we're going to add diplomat if you're not careful. Dr. Ladapo, thank you.
Thanks.
And that's when he put his hand up my blouse and cupped my breast over my bra. I exactly remember looking down, seeing his hand, which is a large hand, thinking to myself, oh my God, this is happening. It happened so quick. He didn't say anything. When I stopped it, he just pulled away and walked away.
Brittany Commisso is listed as executive assistant number 1 in the New York State Attorney General's investigation into New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. She says, as you just heard, that Cuomo groped her at least twice since she started working for him in 2017, most recently this past November. On Friday, Cuomo's lawyer dismissed Commisso's claims, calling them fabricated. And now someone in the administration is resigning. But no, it is not Andrew Cuomo. Melissa DeRosa is Cuomo's top aide. She has been, and this is the title, secretary to the governor since 2017, but joined his office in 2013. Several of his accusers, as well as Albany-based reporters, refer to her as, quote, the enabler in chief. Her name also appears in the AG's 168-page report, a total of 187 times. That means more than once per page. So why is she resigning now? She's defended the governor since these sexual harassment allegations for months, and now a week after the report comes out, she announces she's gone. For the answer to that question, we'll bring in Robert Schalk, former prosecutor, joining us now. His expertise was crucial in the hours just after the AG's report dropped. Robert, people don't resign in the midst of scandal because they feel like it. They do it for personal gain. What's in this for her?
Well, it depends. Obviously, I think, as I said last week when the report came out, I felt like the walls were closing in, both criminally, civilly, and in the impeachment front. Governor Cuomo has been potentially given an ultimatum by his own party to make a decision by the end of the week whether or not he's going to resign or whether or not there's going to be impeachment papers sent to the floor for New York State to begin that process. I think she's unfortunately jumping off a sinking ship way too late. As you indicated, she was mentioned 187 times in that report. And there were been reports that came out over the weekend. The New York Post ran an article where it indicated that Ms. DeRosa was out in front from the beginning. Miss Bennett and Miss Boylan were two of the first accusers of the governor. She was going around Albany, doing everything she could, passing around an op-ed that was never published, desecrating their integrity and their character of these women to an attempt to protect the governor. So she's resigning at a moment where, again, what is she? I don't know what she's looking.
If you were Cuomo's attorney, would you be worried that she's turned state's evidence and somehow gotten an immunity deal right now?
Well, again, what could they be charging her with criminally would be, witness tampering or witness intimidation, if those types of charges could be brought against her. But again, you have to understand something. If she's subpoenaed to a grand jury by a district attorney in the state of New York and is put under oath, she has two choices: tell the truth, plead the fifth. So again, she potentially could have had been contacted by DA's offices throughout the state. Because remember, I know we have the Albany district attorney and the Nassau County district attorney, my former office that I worked at, has put out press releases saying if they happened in our county, we're going to investigate. So he should be worried about the possibility of her being put under oath and telling the truth. And that could be very damning to him on the criminal front and the civil front.
Interestingly enough, it could probably also be damning for him on the impeachment front, which seems to be what's coming the very quickest towards him. The Attorney General's report, while it was exhaustive in its writing, there wasn't really a standard of proof that it said it met, because there was no jury, there was no independent arbiter of these facts. And I guess I'm wondering, what would be the standard of proof if and when it did get to the impeachment trial?
Well, again, you have there's different levels of proof. Preponderance of the evidence is in the civil realm, and then you have proof beyond a reasonable doubt in the criminal realm. For purposes of the impeachment, it's not going to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's going to be that preponderance of the evidence, the totality of it all, the witnesses they hear from, and a response the governor may have. I mean, he obviously is entitled to a defense, as he would be in a criminal prosecution. He has the opportunity, which he's done through his attorneys over the weekend. His attorneys, made the rounds in the media, and he has the right, the absolute right. His lawyers are doing everything they're supposed to do. They are questioning the credibility, saying there's more here. They're calling it a political hit, and they're saying that they disregarded and completely ignored evidence that was beneficial to him. So we're either going to hear about that in the impeachment front, or again, the civil or criminal realm, whatever comes first. But it looks like impeachment is that, unless he resigns.
Well, and noteworthy also that his lawyers weren't allowed to present evidence in the AG's report. It was a one-sided investigation. Robert, thank you very much. We'll leave it there and have you back to discuss. There are the legal ramifications. There is the political ramifications, especially of a resignation or impeachment. But there's also a media aspect to this scandal, because the governor's brother hosts his own cable news show on a competing network, otherwise known as CNN. Our next guest just wrote a piece for the Washington Post calling for CNN to investigate Chris Cuomo, who's going to be off the air for at least 1 week. With that, we bring in Eric Wemple, Washington Post media critic. You see the headline right there: CNN must investigate Chris Cuomo. Eric, Cuomo says he's on a long-planned birthday week vacation this week. Do you believe him?
I do believe that. I mean, he has a history of going off in August. August is obviously a popular time for vacation. I believe that. Mm-hmm.
Well, you and I are both working. I guess the question would be to flip that around. In any other situation, if you were the subject of such intense scrutiny and had a vacation plan, wouldn't you might think about canceling it just to not have the questions that we're asking right now?
Well, that's certainly an option for the network, right? To say, well, people are going to speculate. Let's focus on that. Let's show them that we're confident in you. But of course, again, I believe that his birthday is this week and that he often takes off his birthday. So I'm not too much for, managing to optics. I think if you were planning on taking a vacation, you take a vacation and a week will pass. And if he's back on the air, he's back on the air, which I fully expect.
All right, so we'll know a week today. You say you fully expect, but based on the article you wrote, you think there should be some serious questions asked before he comes back on the air?
Oh, undoubtedly. And as he comes back in the air, I think that CNN should hire one of these outside law firms, commission an investigation into what Chris Cuomo knew, when he knew it, what exact role he played in helping the governor to push back against these sexual harassment allegations. We know through the report and through the reporting of the Washington Post and the Albany Times-Union that Chris Cuomo was part of an informal advisory group. Well, informal/formal, there were people on the outside of the government and inside government that were helping Governor Cuomo find his way through these allegations and craft his message as these allegations piled up. Chris Cuomo was part of that group. And
Eric, CNN has Brian Stelter. Why would they need an outside investigator when they have Brian Stelter? Listen to him.
Well, because the CNN...
This has been a conundrum for CNN that has no perfect answer, no perfect solution. The issue is whether Chris can continue to do his job, continue to be trusted by the audience. Clearly, the leaders of CNN think so. But ultimately, that's up to you. That's up to the people who tune in or don't every night.
Go ahead.
That was a low point. That was a low point for Brian Stelter. I felt that he completely towed the CNN PR line on this whole thing. He minimized the ethical dimensions of this crisis. He minimized what Chris Cuomo did here in helping his brother try to respond to these allegations. This was a complete whitewash, and it's a low for that particular program and perhaps for the network. So
real quick, Eric, I've only got about 30 seconds, but I wanted to get this in. You used to call out Fox News Channel, place I used to work and was honored to have been there, for that blurry line between what was perceived as between Fox News Channel and the Trump administration. Is there a blurry line between CNN and the Democratic establishment that was the Cuomo machine?
Well, there's clearly no line between Chris Cuomo and Andrew Cuomo, and there should have been. A lot of people are saying, hey, this is his brother. No, he was participating in workplace calls with the administration to help his brother. This is completely out of hand, completely out of line, and there's no excuse for it. And CNN needs to know what happened here. I think they don't know what happened here.
Well, that's an interesting point, because I had come on and defended Chris Cuomo and said, if my sister needed help, I would try to help as well. But to your point, the network has a right to know exactly what happened, when he knew, and what he knew, and when did he know it.
And it's something more than just informal, conversation.
It has to be something actually that is independent. Eric, thanks a lot. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right. So where is the national outrage? Speaking of outrage, we're taking a deep dive into the response after a Chicago police officer was shot and killed this weekend.
You can be in jail and get this job. You can be deranged and get this job. If you have a heart attack, they just let your wife start doing the job. All you need is a smile and a tie.
Bill Maher gives us a lesson on the people we elect to Congress. One former congressman says he has a point. That's next. Then, do the Democrats just declare COVID over? A look inside what some would call the most controversial birthday party of the year.
Congressman is literally the only job in the world you can get with so much prestige and so many perks while being a complete doofus with absolutely no skills, knowledge, or qualifications.
That was Bill Maher from Friday talking about the people who decide how much we're taxed, what kind of weapons the military buys, and what kind of health insurance you must buy. Clearly, he doesn't think much of them. A man who knows a lot about what it takes to be in Congress and also succeed in the real world. Former Florida congressman, ambassador to the Vatican, and legendary American businessman Francis Rooney joining us. All right, Congressman, ambassador, is Maher onto something that what makes you great in the real world makes you a lousy congressman?
Well, I think from a general point of view, he makes a bit of a point. Unfortunately, the system that our founders set up, which required separation of powers to succeed, have a certain level of vigilance and competency and independence among the elected officials, so they could duke it out in the policy wars, if you will. But now we have a system of so much money, so much pressure, so much partisanship that the Congress has been reduced to a less than effective body, I think. It's unfortunate.
One thing that the founders did not put in place that perhaps they didn't think they needed, because being in Congress or serving in government service was such a sacrifice, was term limits, and something it seems that we're never going to get.
I think if the founders came back alive today, they would be astounded at the rise of career politicians in the political class. That was not what they had in mind. They had in mind more the Tacitus rising from the fields of Rome to go serve for a while and go home, not a political class. In fact, we had a revolution against monarchy and entrenched government people. And now we have that. And I introduced a bill when I was in Congress that would cut off the pay of legislators after 12 years. So you did not have to have a constitutional amendment. I got about 20 sponsors for that. But there are hundreds of term limit bills that require a constitutional amendment that are never going to go anywhere, that are only signed on to so that people can go home and tell their districts, oh, hey, I'm for term limits, when in truth and in fact, they all know it's not going to happen.
I just want to be clear in terms of what you're saying, which is that there's a lot of people who run on a term limit platform and say, I support term limits. But when you put forth a bill that would have effectively created term limits by cutting salary after 12 years for somebody who stuck around in Washington for 12 years, you couldn't get anybody to sign up for it.
No. In fact, I had one member come up and said, this would be a disaster. This could actually happen. Now, the other thing,
God forbid people leave. I tried to leave Washington after only 5 or 6 years. You lasted 4.
But people would say, on the contrary, as many entrenched Washington elected officials have, that it will overly empower the staff because the members won't know anything. Well, that kind of goes to Bill Maher's point. We need people to run for office that know something and have a background, that have perspective around the world, that can bring that to bear on the exercise of their duties in Congress. I didn't find being a congressman particularly difficult. I find building huge buildings and hospitals difficult, drilling 2-mile-long horizontal wells difficult, but not being a congressman.
Well, you did it with grace and dignity, sir, for 4 years, and we appreciate you coming back and offering perspective free of the title.
Well, I appreciate being on, and I appreciate what you're trying to do to bring visibility to a real need we have in our country, and that is term limits and something about campaign finance reform. Because what happens is, it seems to me, and this is just my opinion, the money driving the politics makes a very risk-averse elective body. And when you're risk-averse, you won't take any hard stands, whether it's against pharma or whether it's to resolve immigration or any of the things that need to be dealt with in our country right now.
Also, when you don't have any other jobs to go back to and there's not much you're good at in life other than being a politician, makes people risk-averse to take hard stands as well. Former Ambassador, appreciate your time, sir, as always. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me on, Leland.
All the best. Coming up, she dedicated her life and gave her life to protecting the community. We're going to take an in-depth look at the violence in Chicago and the memory of this police officer who was shot and killed. We'll talk about it on social media at Leland Vittert, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Amidst unprecedented gun violence across the country and a record number of police officers leaving the force this weekend, we have another example of the complete disregard for the lives of police officers. 29-year-old Chicago police officer Ella French was shot and killed during a traffic stop. Her partner was also shot and is fighting for his life. He's in critical condition tonight. Our prayers are with him and his family. Police say the officer stopped a car on Friday night with 2 men and a woman. They've been arrested. But according to the police, the people in the car started shooting toward the officers, and the officers fired back. One of the men in the car was hit by a bullet. The other was arrested at the scene. The woman was arrested as well. Officer French was rushed to the hospital where she passed away. Folks, I'm new to Chicago. I'm from St. Louis, lived in the Middle East, reported at the White House. And I've been in the media for all of my adult life. And for some reason, Chicago and the events here never get national media attention. You have a rainstorm in New York or a fire in LA, and it changes the conversation for a week. And that's because that's where media executives live. But ask yourself, over the weekend that you were with your family or out for a barbecue, did anyone talk to you about Ella French? Did anybody show you Ella French's picture? If Ella French had been killed by police rather than being a police officer, do you think we would know more or less about her? French's death wasn't covered nationally, but in Chicago, as well there should have been. There's been an outpouring of support for the fallen officer. This was the response to her death in Chicago. We want to show you these images. Hundreds of police officers who gathered outside the hospital where French was taken. There was a procession and scores of salutes, as well there should have been, of officers lining the street as her body was brought to the medical examiner's office. We're going to bring in Anna Devolantes now, WGN radio host and longtime television journalist here in Chicago. And there's so much in this story to talk about, to remember Ella French, among a lot of other things. But I want to pick up exactly where we left off, which is the video of that procession into the medical examiner's office. And there's so much more to that we're now finding out.
There is, Leland. You know, I would say that if you talk with cops in Chicago, they would say that morale is at an all-time low and that they feel no one has their backs and that they feel like the last year and a half, while it's been difficult on so many of us, and there have been so many moments to speak of that have been very challenging for us socially. But for them, I think they'd say that it has been a really, really difficult year. Yeah. And that no one has supported them is the feeling they get. So here we are today, and they have see one of their own die in the line of duty, basically shot in the face while during a traffic stop, a horrible situation. She is being brought to the morgue. That's the hospital scene, but later she is brought to the morgue, the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office. I've been covering crime for a very long time in Chicago, and I will tell you, it is tradition that
this is the scene right here.
That the bagpipers will all the police officers will line up, and the bagpipers will play. They will play you off. It is tradition. It is respect. They will salute you, as you're seeing here. This kind of video I've seen happen other times as a reporter on the street. It is important. You are showing that you are seeing your officer off, and you won't leave them. Even in their death, you will take them to the morgue. Well, unfortunately, I think we have some sound here from Eric Carter, the second in command in the Chicago Police Department, and what he said to officers as they were awaiting this procession, not at the hospital, but at the morgue.
Section, we're not going to be waiting on the bagpipes. Go ahead and get the vehicle inside. Take it all the way inside. Do not stop. All right, take the vehicles inside. Take the vehicles inside. Debbie, take it all the way inside. Do not stop. All the vehicles inside, do not stop. All vehicles inside, do not stop.
1200, I've reached medical examiner's office 11.
We reached 2111 West Harrison Street. The medical examiner's office council time is 01:55 hours on the clock. The 8th of August, 2021, Citywide 6 Clay.
To a lot of folks, that might not mean very much. To police officers, that means the world. The ones I've talked to, Leland, tell me that they thought it was disgraceful and disrespectful that they didn't wait the 15 or 20 minutes just to assemble the bagpipes so that they could see Ella French off to the morgue. That's important to them. They do it all the time. It's tradition, and they weren't allowed to do it this time. They really feel like it's another slap in the face, and the second in command in the police department ordered it. That's what they're telling me. Privately, they say that was terrible. It was just really poor form.
We've got a picture of Eric Carter to put up so we know who we're talking about, the voice, if you will, who said, do not wait, do not stop. I counted 4 do not waits, do not stops. You have to imagine someone who's a career law enforcement officer, as he would be, why?
You know, I've heard maybe there were too many calls in the city, maybe there were other 10-1s, maybe this, maybe that, but you had officers who even went and changed their clothes, detectives, plainclothes guys who are on the bagpipes, who ran home to quickly get there just because they know the importance of this. They know how important it is to their fellow officers that you see them till the very end. I just think it was just a yet another sort of slap in the face of the way it's being perceived by officers.
And we also know here in Chicago that recruiting officers is problematic, and the number of officers who's retiring continues to go up. You covered the riots and the protests last year. It seems as though when a bad cop kills a person, there is this inexhaustible outrage, even if it doesn't happen in the city that you're talking about. The inexhaustible outrage happened here with the riots. But when a bad person kills a cop, no one seems to care very much. Have we gotten any kind of anger or discussion from the community organizers and the do-gooders around Chicago?
I talked to an alderman today in Englewood neighborhood, and she was very emotional about the officer's death. I would say that if you live in Chicago right now, you've got to realize that you can be about police accountability. You can be about rebuilding community trust. You can be about reform, and also realize that police are not the enemy, and that police, the overwhelming majority of them, would rush into danger, rush toward the gunshots, risk their own lives to save yours, and they do it all the time. And Officer Ella French is like the epitome. She could be on the poster for recruitment. She was, by all accounts, just an incredible officer who wanted to do the right thing wanted to help people, wanted to protect people. That's why she joined the force. Her brother very passionately explained how this was a life of service she was seeking. And she represents more than we know, more than we hear.
For sure.
The average police officer, that's who they are.
Well, it's almost remarkable what they do when nothing happens, because that's what their job is for nothing to happen. It's when things go wrong that sadly we learn about them.
Yeah, and some of those for good reason.
For some for good reason, some for bad reason.
Yeah, that's true.
This poll caught our attention from WGN. Ben Bradley, your good friend here at WGN, pointed this out to us. Do you view the Chicago Police Department positively, either very or somewhat? 60%. That doesn't sound like a department that has this huge crisis, yet we've got crime out of control and retirements way down, retirements way up and recruitment way down.
I was actually heartened to see 60% felt that way. I really was. You hear just the stats, and you know that Chicago police officers are being shot at near record numbers, either shot or shot at. 40 of them have been shot at. 11 have actually been hit. And so you think about, okay, what has led us to this point? And we know a little bit about that. There are some other reasons. It is complex. But at the end of the day, there is sort of this feeling, this general sentiment you get that there is a loss of respect for police officers. And I think rebuilding that trust is going to be absolutely the focal point to the way forward. It just is, Leland.
Well, and you have to imagine the audio that you just played that you got from your sources does not do a lot to rebuild trust among the rank and file. As you do more reporting on this, come back and share it with us.
I absolutely
will. It's really important.
Thanks, Leland.
Anna Devolantes, thank you very much. Coming up next, we're going to talk about another Chicagoan, former President Obama, who danced his way into his 60s, acting as if the pandemic is over. So, do optics matter when we come back? So, who among us does not want COVID to be over? Well, of course, there are a few people who love masks and feeling morally superior to the unvaccinated, but for the rest of us, it would be great to simply declare the pandemic over. And now you have to think about who could do that for us. And we'll start with the qualities that someone would need to do that. Someone with wide-ranging trust of the American people, someone with some leadership experience, someone with a history of commenting on the moral topics of the day. And for that, I nominate former President Barack Obama to declare the pandemic over. When he says it's over, it's over. As my mother likes to say, though, actions speak louder than words. So rather than declaring the pandemic over, when President Obama, really shows America, shows us that the pandemic is over, it's over. And nothing, I mean nothing, says the pandemic is over like a birthday party of a few hundred folks who all take their private jets to Martha's Vineyard for the weekend. We're glad he did it. We wish him a happy birthday. Professor Jason Nichols teaches about these matters at the University of Maryland and joins us now. All right, Professor, he said it. He did it. Is it over? And this is when your last guest doesn't
I can't
have
hear
audio.
Leland,
He can't
but I hear
us.
you guys.
He hears our producers, but he doesn't hear me, is what I'm getting. All right, so there was one person who opined about this situation and said, really, none of us should worry about this situation because of who the people at that party were. Do we have some pictures of the party? I think we do. It was an A-list. David Axelrod, the president's longtime advisor, we understand got disinvited so President Obama could dance and party with a number of people who I don't know their names of because I'm not into pop culture, but I was told that there were some real A-listers there. And now we understand that the professor could hear us. Professor, you're on everybody's A-list, on our A-list, but I don't think you were invited, right?
He's cutting in and out now.
Nope. Well,
I hear you, Leland.
Oh, you hear
Leland,
me? All right. Were you invited?
Okay, now I hear you.
No, a miracle. It finally worked. Were you invited?
Let's blame it on Obama. No, I was not invited.
I'm sorry.
I would have liked to have been invited.
Yeah, we all would have. Well, hold on. This is an important question, though. Would you have gone if invited? And by going and by partying, do you think this says, and hopefully it does, hey, pandemic's over, let's all move on and be vaccinated and have a great time?
No, I think it does not necessarily say that. What it does say is that that part of the country is not a hot spot, that they had a COVID coordinator for the party, that, you know, you had to adhere to a testing regimen, and that the CDC, they were following CDC guidelines. So if you're going to do all of that, then you can have a party anywhere in the country. If you're going to follow CDC guidelines, you're going to have a testing regimen before the party even starts, and you're going to have a COVID coordinator there. I think it's then you can have your party. Then you can have Sturgis.
So only the rich, only the really super rich who can afford the COVID coordinator and the testing protocols can have parties.
Or you can wear a mask. You know, I think that's part of the health guidelines that the CDC has put out. Okay. You can double mask it, and you can have your party.
I've yet to hear double masking. I wanted to get your thought, though, because there was a New York Times reporter who summed things up a little bit shorter than you did. Take a listen to her soundbite. We'll see if you agree.
Sure.
This is going to be safe. This is a sophisticated, vaccinated crowd, and this is just about optics. It's not about safety.
And the left wonders why the rest of the country thinks they're arrogant?
Yeah, I think that was a poor choice of words to say sophisticated. Makes it sound as though other people are not sophisticated. But I think, you know, the important part was that she said that the crowd was vaccinated, that they were being tested, and therefore it was safe in order to have this party and to have people not masked. So I think that was her major point, but it was definitely a poor choice of words on her part.
What do you make of the fact that all the staff had to wear masks and the guests didn't?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably not a great look either. I think that, you know, there are lots of ways that they could have done things to create better optics. But one of the things that we've been hearing on the right oftentimes is, why is this person wearing a mask indoors? They don't need to do that. This is just theater. So I think that, you know, they didn't have to wear masks at the party. And I think that, you know, they weren't adhering to political theater.
I got bad news for you. We're going to have to make up all the time we spent trying to get your connection good. The next time we talk, we'll talk to you soon, all right?
For sure. Thanks,
we got to run. Thanks, Professor. We'll be right back.